Good morning. I'm Lawrence Geller, the founder of For Advisors Only. Welcome to Meet the Masters of Insurance webinar series. This is the 7th of what we expect to be a great many webinars with Canadians who've dedicated their careers to learning the art and science of insurance, sales, and service. Webinars in this series are now scheduled through the end of the year, and more are being added to the schedule daily. Over the years, I've observed that every successful insurance agent who I've ever met has succeeded differently. Even if they are in the same field, deal with similar clients, and even if they're related or in business together. This is what makes the sale and servicing of insurance one of the best careers that I can imagine. It's possible to become a success in our business with diligence, integrity, and experience. With this webinar series, we intend to prove that any type of person can succeed with time and hard, thoughtful work. Our goal is to create a video record of each of the Masters of Insurance so that some of their experience and their expertise will be available to anyone who'd like to learn from them. We're recording all of these sessions and we'll be posting them once we have 8 or so. We'll be watermarking them, and they'll be available for anyone to view. Today, we have Ted Polci with us. Barry Pascal will be interviewing Ted. Ted manages First York with Ted Warburton. Ted's made a career-long commitment to succession planning and the insurance industry. These give him the experience and credentials vital to advise some of Canada's most successful family business owners. Ted has served as the chair of LUAC Advocis. He's a charter member of CALU and has served on the executive committee of the Society of Trust and Estate Practitioners and was the president of STEP Toronto. Ted has spoken at the Canadian Bar Association, the CICA, the Canadian Tax Foundation, CALU, and for many insurance industry educational sessions. He was a contributing author on insurance for Advising the Family-Owned Business, a publication of Canada Law Book. Typically, Ted's clients are people who've reached a stage of their lives where they are focused on structuring their succession plan to minimize the risks and tax costs of business transition. Some want to retire without damaging the business and may need a plan to keep key people in place to run the business until the next generation is ready to take the reins. We have now booked webinars through the end of September, with new dates being added daily. Please welcome Ted Polci, interviewed by Barry Pascal.
Lawrence, thank you so much. What a privilege it is for me to be here with you, Ted. But before we begin, I just want to take a moment, as we always do, to thank you, Lawrence, for devoting your time to all of us and bringing us together in this meaningful way to learn together and to learn from each other. And so I couldn't think of a better person to learn from than you, Ted. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Barry. It's a pleasure. In fact, it's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Well, you know, Ted, I remember sitting in the audience at the CALU annual general meeting when you were featured in their Meet the Producers segment, and you talked about your practice. And you talked about the types of people that you deal with and how you deal with them. And the two things that struck me were, firstly, how personal your business is, how it's so strongly based on relationships. But the other thing that struck me was it never occurred to me that your life was other than the way it is, that it was other than such a successful life with such privilege. And when we spent time together the other day, I got to learn that your beginnings were not so much the way they are today. And what I'd love to begin with, normally I say, how did you get into the business? But what I'd love for you to share is the difference between when you finished high school and when you started university, because that was a huge wake up for you. So please tell us.
Yeah, as we discussed the other day, I had a different family background, difficult. Both my parents had some issues, and they separated when I was fairly young. Didn't have a lot of guidance, or I guess I was about 11 when they separated. They had before, and then again when I was about 13 or 14 for good. And things were rough around the house for a variety of reasons. And my sister got married fairly young and left, so just my mother and I, and that was not great. So through high school, I wasn't a great student. I was about a 55% student, which is just enough to get through and not enough to get noticed. Yeah, when I went to grade 13, I was telling you this, that I actually had 87%, but you had to add up all of my subjects to get to the 87, and there were 6 or 7 subjects. So that was not great. Coming through, it was sort of the High Park area. I was driving and to go pick up my report card, although I knew what it said, but I wanted to pick it up. Came across a friend that I played football with, and I knew he had not passed grade 13 either. I stopped, said hello, and I said, "What are you going to do in September?" And he said, "Going to Ryerson." And I said, "I've heard of that, but what are you doing?" And he said, "Business administration." I said, "Oh." And he said, "You can get in with grade 12. And I said, "Oh, okay." He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm not going back to grade 13, and I'm not ready to start work yet." So I think I was 18 at the time, maybe 19. And I said, "I'm going to have a look at Ryerson." He said, "Well, just pick up a form." And so I did, and I get in. And I remember getting my report card at Christmas. The instructor called us up to actually pick up our report. And I looked at it. I had 87%, but this time it was a real 87%. And I, my God, what happened here? My first reaction was I had somebody else's report card, because I just hadn't been aware that I was doing that well.
Something's wrong here.
Something's wrong here. Should I tell him, And anyway, but I looked at it and said, "Yeah, that's my mark." And that, yeah, I remember that. And I remember, that something's going on here. I think I found something that I like, that I'm good at. So I continued at Ryerson, and I did well all the way through. I struggled in one semester because I couldn't pay my tuition. I had to keep working into late October. And I got passing marks, but just.
Because you were putting yourself through school.
Yeah. Yeah. There was no one that had any money to support. So went back to school, and fourth semester did fine. Last semester I did fine. And that was it. So I was finished, and I thought, so what do I do now? I'm still not ready to work. Want to go to law school, I think. That seemed like a good idea, because I'd figured out I never thought I was stupid, but I just didn't think I was academic. And then all of a sudden I am. So I thought, I'm going to look at law school. So I talked to Western, and they said you need a degree, a pre-admission degree, or 2 years, but of university. And I thought, well, where am I going to get that? Because nobody gave any credits to Ryerson at the time. And found out University of Michigan gave credits. So I went down to Ann Arbor and met with them, and they said, "Yes, like your marks, like the courses, 3 full semesters here, you'll have an undergraduate degree." I said, "Great. How much do I need to pay?" And they said, "You need $4,000 in the bank when you come here in August." And I said, "Okay." So I went back to my summer job and didn't do that well. So for a variety of reasons. And so there I am at the end of August, and can't get into University of Michigan. Had not gone to any job interviews. Well, I'd gone to a couple. Actually had a couple of job offers from Ortho and somebody else, I forgot, one of the big marketing companies. But London Life had approached me, and they had actually made me a job offer as well. And
But the job offer isn't what drew you. What drew you to that first interview at London Life?
Well, back in the spring of that year, putting yourself through school, you don't have any money. And I couldn't pay my rent 1 month. And so they said, "We're offering $50 if you'll come to London." and meet with us, for expense money for the weekend. Well, I happened to be going to Strathroy, right near London. And so I just changed the dates, and I went down and picked up the expense money and paid my rent that month. And they made a job offer. And we had an interesting conversation, but I said, I'm going to do that. But in August, I called Ron Potter, who was a great guy at London. He just passed a couple of years ago, but called Ron and said, Ron, is that job offer still open? And he said, yes. And I said, okay. I said, I'll take it, but I want you to know I'm only coming for a year, then I'm going back to school. And he said, that's great, but we'll see about the 1 year thing. And so that was 57 years ago. And I think you'd have to say Ron was correct about the 1 year thing. And I wasn't. This is an amazing business. And you hear me say this, whenever you talk to me about it. Where else can you, literally talk to some of the wealthiest people in the country, earn some of the incomes that people in our business are earning? You cannot be fired. Where does that exist other than in this business? You don't need any capital.
Right.
It's crazy.
The barrier to entry is desire. And I think you demonstrated desire in every stage of your career. So now you're working at London Life and you got the call. So tell me what that call was.
From Howard. There was a firm called Elder Donaldson and Crofts, and anybody that's been in the business for probably more than 30 years knows who they were, but they were the who's who of the insurance business. They were charter life underwriters. They were a small firm within London Life, and I think London Life regretted letting them get set up because they became kind of famous. And Dave Donaldson, great guy. And but anyway, Howard Crofts called me and said, would you like to have lunch? And I said, yeah. And I knew what that was about. I thought they may offer me a position there, or at least to come and join them. So we had lunch, nice lunch. We talked for an hour and a half, and came back to the office. And I thought that went pretty good. And then nothing, total silence for about a month and a half. And so I spoke to my manager, Ken Morton, and I said, Ken, what's going on? He said, I don't know. He said, I'll call them. So he called Howard, and he came over to me, and he was really kind of disturbed. He said, Ted, I don't know how to tell you this, but Howard said your manners aren't very good. I said, well, what are you talking about? He said, your table manners aren't very good. And I said, you're kidding me? And he said, no. He said, that's what he said. And a lot of their clients went to private schools, to Upper Canada College, and Redway, and you name it. And he's concerned that you might not fit with some of their clients. I said, well, I don't want any of their clients. I want to have my own clients. But anyway, I was very upset because I saw this really outstanding opportunity disappear because I didn't have good table manners.
So before you tell us what you did, I want to just take you back to my chair when I was watching you at Meet the Producers. And like so many people in the audience, I was asking myself, how do I get from here to there? How do I get to where Ted Polci is in the industry? And this story is so telling, because when you told me the story and he told you what the problem was, you looked at me and you said, good news. That to me was good news. And explain why it was good news.
Well, because I could fix it. And I had an option. I think we talked about this. I had an option. I could be angry, and I could say, what a bunch of idiots. I don't want to go there anyway. I'm going to stay where I am, build my own business, whatever. But the opportunity to work with these guys was so amazing. And I thought, I have to fix this. Just for me, I have to fix it. So I spent the afternoon looking through the yellow pages. I went home. I couldn't work. I had to go home. And I went home, looked through the yellow pages, and found a lady that had a company called Savoir Faire. Hard to forget a name like that, Savoir Faire. And called her, and I said, I need to learn table manners. And she said, this is the right place. So we had a 6-week course. I think it was about 6 weeks. We met a couple of times a week, and she told me how to set a table, how to eat, coming in towards, and what dessert spoon and dessert fork, and all the things that nobody wants to know about, really, but you have to know if you want to eat with royalty. And so at the end of the 6 weeks, I was knowledgeable, and I called Howard Crofts. I said, Howard, would you like to have lunch? And he was surprised. He wasn't expecting the call. And he said, sure, Ted. And I said, okay. So we went out for lunch. And I didn't say a word about what I'd just been doing. I just ate. And after the session was over, I went back and Ken said, how'd it go? And I said, I think it was fine, but Howard could use some table manners. He's a great guy, but all those guys had come from simple beginnings, and they were eating the way they thought you're supposed to eat, and largely it was fine. But there were things that they weren't doing, that other things they should have done. Anyway, it was funny. I immediately became a table snob. Nobody wanted to have dinner with me, but anyway, and I got a call a few days later, and they said, we'd like you to join us. So I went over to join them, and I worked with them for about 4 years, roughly, 5 years, maybe 5 years, and just an amazing learning experience. I mean, you couldn't pay for an education like that. Watching, mostly I worked with Dave Donaldson, but just
We
watching
talked
how
about
he
mentors.
worked. Yeah,
And he became your mentor, didn't he?
yeah. I mean, he was fabulous. I think he was in one business meeting with me. That's all I can recall. It's a long time ago now. It's early 70s, but and he was unbelievable to watch. I had been kind of edging into this client. It was a rental company, and I knew the son from Ryerson, actually. And the dad was a tough guy to get along with. And David said, invite them to come lunch with us at the National Club, and we'll have a meeting in my office for 10 or 15 minutes, and then we'll go have lunch. And I said, okay. So I invited them down, and they came in. And Donaldson just talked, I mean, we all do this now, but I didn't know how to do it. And he talked for 10, 15 minutes. He said, so look, the dad's name was Horton. He said, Horton, if you kick the bucket, and when he said that, I had who talks like that? This guy's doing business with the who's who of Canada. What's he mean, kick the bucket? Anyway, he said, if you kick the bucket, what happens to your company? Horton said, I don't know. I guess I got some tax to pay. I guess John would take it over. Dave said, what about your other kids? Well, I don't know. He said, Horton, you need some insurance. I think you need a couple million of insurance, but you certainly need at least $1.5 million. Can you afford $20,000, $25,000 a year? Horton said, oh, sure. He said, okay, let's go have some lunch. We went for lunch, and a sale that I had been hoping was $500 or $600 suddenly became $20,000.
What was your biggest sale to that point?
Oh, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10,000. Maybe it's a long time ago, but that would have been a big sale. 8 or 10,000 would have been pretty big.
So 2.5 times your biggest sale, 15 minutes before lunch. In
15 minutes, and then we went to lunch, and it was just an amazing thing to watch. So, but I learned, and I know one of the things we talked about. I was sitting with David, and I'm guessing this was about 2 years into my experience there, and the phone rang. David never kept anything on his desk. That was something else I learned from him, is keep it simple, keep it neat. And but he had one file on his desk, and picked up the phone. He said, oh, yep. Hi, David. Yeah, good. Okay, all right. And yeah, all right. And his phone number. Okay, yeah, great. I'll give him a call. Thanks, David. Hung up the phone. I said, what was that? He said, that was David Wardenbeck, and he's got a client for me. I said, oh, like, how much is it? Do you know how much it is? He said, yeah, it's probably, I've forgotten what he said, 50,000, 60,000 a premium. And I thought, that's how much I'm making in a year.
What year would that have been?
Probably 72. 73, something like that, 74 maybe. I
So
was
what
there
would your
until
takeaway
late
from watching
76.
that?
I need some of that. That's, that is how I need to work. I want to have people calling me and saying, I have a client, we've done some work, we need you to get involved. You're the insurance expert. That's what I wanted. So that's what I did. Inspired by that, and by watching Andy, Howard, and Dave work, I said I need to do that. So I enlisted two of our associates, Dave Brooks and Bruce Crofts, Howard's son, and we started doing seminars for lawyers and accountants. Between us, we were able to get, I think there were 9 people to come to the first seminar. And of those, I think I knew 4 or 5 of them. I've forgotten, maybe 6 of them. And at the end of about 2 years, 2.5 years, I had 110 contacts, lawyers and accountants. And they were, I mean, not all strong, but there were some good people in that. And that group fed my business flow for a long time and led me to other professionals.
So now, on the theme of trying to get from where I'm sitting to where you're sitting, tell the story about when you went to lunch with a few lawyers and a few other advisors and how that unfolded.
Give me some more on that. I'm
So
trying to
you
recall
went
that.
after you met all these lawyers, you and a
Yep.
few advisors said, okay, let's get together with a few of these lawyers.
Yeah.
So you had lunch
Yeah.
and
Yep.
everybody agreed, this is great. We want to work together.
Yep.
So let's get in
Yep.
touch.
Yeah. So that was the firm, Davies, and they're one of 5 firms that I'm working with in Toronto. And David Donaldson said, look, you young guys should get to know the young guys over at Davies. And they were a small firm at the time. I'm going to say there were 16, 17 lawyers. They might have
Wow.
been 18 or 19. And he said, you should get to know some of these young guys. They've got some good young people there. So he invited David Ward, and there were a handful of people. I won't mention all their names, but he invited a bunch of people over. And we had a session that morning on estate planning, taxes, all of that. The capital gains tax was new, so that was part of the deal. And then we did a session over at Davies Ward on use of insurance in estate planning and business insurance and everything. And we led some of those conversations. And there were, as I recall, there were 5 of their young fellows, and outstanding people. One of them became chair of the Securities Commission of Ontario some years later. One of them was a senior advisor to the Reichman family. I mean, just you name it, these guys were top people. We were all supposed to take leadership with some of them and take the relationship with them, but nobody else did. So I ended up with pretty much all of them working with me. And that has been really valuable. I've written some large cases through that. And I wrote a couple of cases last year, one in particular, through one of the senior tax people at Davies. And it was a phone call. Actually, the first thing I got was a message from the client. And he said, my lawyer at Davies, he mentioned the name, he said, tells me that you can help me set up a charitable donation for when I die at 120. So he said, so can you help me? And that took 1.5 years, but we put it together. Large case.
So just in terms of learning the Ted Polci way of doing things, they say in parenting, 3/4 of the job is just showing up.
Yeah.
And I listened to that story, and there you were with a group of other very motivated advisors from a top firm, but you were the one that showed up, and you're the one that followed up.
Yeah.
And then the other thing.
Yeah. Just when you start with nothing, I mean, I think that's an understatement. I started with less than nothing. You don't have options. If you don't get aggressive and keep walking forward, nobody's going to come and hand you something. So I'm aggressive, but I'm polite, you know.
Hmm. Well, there's a kindness to everything that you do. And I think people feel it from you. You can't fake that. It's real.
Yeah,
It's real. It's a
yeah, no,
genuine desire to make a difference.
yeah.
So
I hope so. I mean, yeah, that's how I
what's
feel. You know?
what struck me when you told the story about getting that call, and you mentioned from Davies about a year and a half, 2 years ago now,
Yeah,
was you'd come full circle from what you saw Dave Donaldson do right in front of you and said, I
yeah,
want some of that. And you made it so. You worked for
yeah,
it and you made it so.
yeah. Look, I mean, I didn't stumble on it. It happened in front of me, but it was just so obvious that that was the way to go. And any young person today, and this is a different business, you know that, than what it was. You've been in the business 40 years,
Yeah.
roughly, yeah. So you understand a lot of this. And for me, it's been, I have to do some subtraction, but I think it's 57 or 58. Um, it's a different business today. The banks have taken up a lot of the lower market and even some of the middle market, and they've made some big inroads in the bigger market. But I see cracks all the time in what the banks are doing. Um, they don't have the expert insurance advisors. They can't keep them. They can't develop them, and the insurance industry isn't hiring much anymore. I mean, people come in through you, through me, through brokers like us, but like PPI isn't hiring anybody. So I think the opportunities are huge if you work through the lawyers and somewhat through the accountants, but some of the accountants have been compromised, I would say a little bit compromised, because they can take fees from insurance people. You know, they have to figure it out somehow, but I think some of them found a way to do it. If we work with the lawyers, because the banks are not typically using the estate planning lawyers, they're using their own people. So if we work with the lawyers, we're allies. We work together. We can send our clients to the lawyers. They can send their clients to us. We can work together. I don't think that's coming down anytime soon. So I think it's still there, and I've been advising my son and anybody who listens to me that that's the way to go.
So your son's in practice?
Yeah, yeah. My son Rob is in business with me, and he's doing well and building his business. Almost all of them are his own clients. A couple of them have come through me, but you know, he's building his own business.
Have you ever done cases together?
Yeah, we have. We've done a few. Um, I want to help him when he wants me to, and I don't want to insert myself. I think it's important that we all, you know, find our own roadmap to where we want to go.
You know,
Mm.
this applies. A question came up, and it applies to what you were just talking about, especially when we hear about your son coming into the business. You commented on the fact that when you have nothing, it's easy to stay hungry.
Yeah.
But how do you stay hungry once you've achieved a level of success and comfort?
Get rid of the money. don't don't let it sit in a bank account where you can see it. You know, and I don't mean spend it. I mean invest it, buy
Right.
something, and then put it aside. And I don't mean be a liquid. You have to be a liquid. But I mean, I always worried about when I become, and I think I always thought I would become successful and financially, and as you were saying the other day, I always thought I'd have a good balance sheet at some point. Um, but you can't have the money sitting in front of you because then you start to relax a little bit.
It's distracting.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
came from
I don't want to
Shannon.
relax.
Shannon Hughes asked that question, by the way. Thank you, Shannon.
Yeah.
But on that subject, because we learned about how you started from humble beginnings and your ability to learn from people when they speak to you. You don't get offended. You take things to heart and you turn them into opportunities.
Yeah.
But you've also had some adversity. And we talked about that the other day, that when you had a health challenge,
Yeah.
And yet you were able to balance business and dealing with your health. But what are some of the important lessons that you learned? Because you talked about balance sheet going into situations
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, like you're talking about the brain surgery that I had. I was, and I wrote an article about this, and I don't know if anybody's seen it, but it was in Forum a few years ago. I was on my way to the club for a workout one morning about 5:45, had a seizure, totaled my car, and woke up in the hospital in an ambulance. Actually, they were taking me to the hospital, and I didn't know what had happened, didn't know who I was or what day it was, and got to the hospital, and they said you have a grade. I'm compressing a few hours into 2 minutes, but they said you have a grade 2 meningioma. That means it's not cancer, which is good, but it means that it comes back. It's likely to come back. And in my case, they said something more than 75% chance. So they wheeled me into surgery that day, and it was a serious operation. Brain surgery always is. I get out of the hospital in a couple of days, didn't have a lot of energy or focus for a while, a month, 2 months. And they were going to put me into uh, radiation because it's a grade 2. That's a good way to kind of keep it down. And they didn't get all of the tumor. They said they got most of it, but not all of it. So they were getting me ready to have radiation. And a friend of mine called and said, "How are you doing?" And I said, "I'm fine. I'm going to be getting radiation at Sunnybrook." And he said, "Have you heard of proton?" And I said, "No. What's that?" And he said, "Well, his daughter had cancer, and he said she got proton. We went to Mass General in Boston." And I said, "What is that? I don't know what that is." So we talked about it for 45 minutes on the phone. I read some articles for a couple of days, and that's what I should be getting. Proton is very precise radiation. It's like your everybody talks about a tumor is like a golf ball, or it's a grapefruit. There's no room for grapefruits in the head, by the way. But tumors aren't shaped like golf balls or grapefruits. They tend to be flat, uneven, irregular. Um, and mine was 5 centimeters by 2 centimeters by 2 centimeters, roughly, fairly large. And so they got most of it out, but left a little fringe in. So anyway, I went to Boston. It was $300,000 Canadian. It was actually 275 US, but 75,000 they refunded at the end. But it ended up costing about 300,000 Canadian. We moved there for 7 weeks, and I feel guilty when I say this, but I was on the radiation table getting proton for about 15 minutes a day. The rest of the day, my wife and I walked all over the place. We had a ball. We had dinner every night. I went to a baseball game, but I couldn't stand the noise. I was still sensitive to
Right.
noise. Well, we had a great 7 weeks. We had a honeymoon, and came back, and I thought, well, I think we've dealt with this. I know hopefully that's the end of it and no more. I switched my care to Toronto Western. There's a great surgeon there called Dr. Zeta, and she's been monitoring me for the last 5 years. And then in September, the MRI said that the tumor had come back. So didn't like that, but I thought I'll get Gamma Knife because I'm an expert now. I read Dr. Google all the time. So I said, "What about Gamma?" And she said, "Gold standard is surgery." And I said, "Yeah." I said, run it by the review board at Princess Margaret and University Health Network. And she's chair of neurosurgery there. So she said she would.
So, Ted, this is sort of like
Yeah.
the way you negotiate underwriting for one of your cases,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it is. It is. I want to know more, and I want to look to the detail, and I want to know I'm doing the right thing. Anyway, it came back unanimous surgery. I said, oh, okay. I said, look, I'm losing sleep on this. I don't like thinking about, because I know what you do now. The first time I didn't make any decisions. This time I have to say yes or no. And if I say yes, I know you're going to make a cut in my head. and I don't like the whole idea of it. And I said, can you get me in quickly? And she said, yes, we will. So 2 weeks later, I went in for surgery and woke up, felt great. And I mean, literally, I recovered, in my opinion, 100% within a week, maybe 2 weeks. I was working, felt great, and feel great now. So made a nice donation to the hospital because I didn't have to pay them 300,000 Canadian. That was nice, you know. We have great healthcare in Canada. You need to access it, but we have good healthcare. So that's kind of the story. And so I'm working now and again, and I'm writing business again, you know.
So why did I want to bring this up? I wanted to bring it up because when you shared this with me the other day, I learned so much about you, but it also taught me so much about what we all need to know in our businesses. Because I saw, first of all, your skill set and how you used your skill set. The same way as you found Ryerson, a friend bumped into you and said, have you heard of Croton? And you said no, but you made it so. But the other thing you always talk about, and you talked about it today as well, is saving and investing and building a balance sheet so that you have choices.
Yeah.
And I think Joe Dickstein, both of our mentors,
Yeah.
spoke to you about that because you asked him, how come some successful insurance people end up with nothing?
Yeah. I phrased it differently. I said, how come so many? Yeah, because some would be a few, you know, but a lot, most insurance successful people end up with nowhere near what you think they might have. I know people who have made millions every year and they don't have much at 60, 65, 70. And Joe, and when I saw your session, Barry, the first one, I really enjoyed that.
Thank you.
And I heard a bunch of Joe Dickstein stories, and I love all of them. And I thought, oh no, I'm going to have to get all my Joe Dickstein stories out because I got 100 of them as well. But Joe said it's ego, and some other things, but mainly ego. People think that I had a good year, I can do this every year. And he said, but that's not how our business works. You have good years and you have bad years. And sometimes you go 3-4 years without a large case, depending on what you're working on. So he said, you need to, as you say, build a balance sheet, but you need to protect your confidence and keep yourself working with a good attitude. And when you have money in the bank, when you have no bills that are crinkling at the edges, it's a better way to work.
And then talk to me a bit about last year in business, because we know you had a serious health issue to deal with. How did last year go compared to other years?
Oh, it was my best year ever. You know, it's crazy. I've had, I mean, I don't know if we talked about this, but I've had a lot of good years. I've had more years than I probably deserve, more good years. But 5 years ago, when I went to Boston and I was recovering and I was not doing as well as I'm doing now, I had a great year. Wrote some business on one of my good clients, and we got it. I have good staff. We got it underwritten properly, got it issued. I was participating, but I wasn't 100% in the game. And it was a good year. We actually wrote a couple of cases that year and it went well. So that was pretty good. This past year, between the pandemic, and I'm still being careful, not as careful as I was, but I was wearing a mask everywhere until a few months ago, not everywhere, but, you know, going into restaurants and that kind of thing. But I've been working remote. And I told someone, you can't work remote in our business. You have to be in person, shaking hands, eye to eye. And turns out you can work remote. I wrote 3 large cases that got issued last year, a lot of business. And 2 of the clients I had never met. And one of them I met when I went to see him. I was upset about obviously what happened in October in Israel. And he's Jewish, spends a lot of time in Israel. And I said, look, you know, I can't give you money. And I know you're incurring some costs to set up some of the work that's being done. but I can make a donation, and I want to make a donation to an organization in Israel that's doing good work. And he's very charitable. He's the guy that wanted to have this big foundation donation. So I gave him a check, a large check, and also donated on behalf of the lawyer that referred the case, who was also Jewish. And they were both ecstatic. And so that, I mean, that had a good year last year, and I felt good at the end of it all. And my son, I should tell you this, who is in New York. I have 4 sons, all great guys. My son in New York called me just after the October 7th attack. He said, "Dad, I know you've got some Jewish clients. Send them emails, call them, let them know you feel terrible what happened." He said, "No, you do, but let them know." So I did. I called a bunch of people, but I sent probably 20, 25 emails out. I got a response from every one of them. I mean, some of them, I was practically in tears reading them, just saying, "This is so important to me to hear from you on this." You know, it was very touching. So, so that was great. That was great. Yeah.
It's especially important during times of tragedy and crisis. And the lesson that we've learned over and over, which is at a time of crisis, our clients really want to hear from us. And, you know, for many of us, we're living a tragedy like this for the first time in our lifetimes. And we're experiencing it over there. We're experiencing it over here. And it's so important that you reached out in that genuine way. And I think it's one of the things that differentiates, that makes you special.
I almost feel like I'm Jewish, you know. I mean, I I have clients and friends, but I mean, we went to Israel a few years ago. I mean, we were knocked out. You've been there, I'm sure.
Yes.
We were just knocked out. Unbelievable. What a culture. And I mean, and you know, through all the medicine research I've been doing for me and for a few other people, no one would believe how much is coming out of Israel in terms of new technology. Unbelievable. What would we do without Israel? So I'm, you know, I feel like I'm Jewish.
Well, that's so nice.
At least.
That's pretty special. Let me ask you, how do you work differently today than, say, 10 or 15 years ago?
Yeah, I think I'm still looking for new clients, so that's for sure. I did my plans. I do plans every year in December for the next year, and so I did my plans. And I'm looking for 3 large cases this year, and of certain size and minimum certain size. And so that's still there. And I'll do that by working through the law firms largely. I may go back to 1 or 2 clients and say, "Look, we're doing something in this area. I think you know some people that could use this kind of work. Let me know if."
So you'll ask for an introduction.
Yeah, I don't do a lot of that, but I have done some. Mostly I work through the lawyers, and there are a couple of accountants. So, you know, hoping to get that. And I mean, I could get 5 cases. I could get 1. You know, I don't know, but I have great renewals. I mean, I have no issues financially, so I don't have to get any business, but I know that I'll be busy. I know I'll see some great people, and I think I'll do some good work, and I think it'll be great. So I'm
You also
building
talked to me
my
about
business.
running less.
Pardon me?
You said you run less now. You do more, but you run less.
Yeah. Well, I'm working. I start about 8 o'clock, do my emails, go to the office around 9. And if I'm in Florida, which I am in the winter a fair bit, I go into my office in our home there, and work till about 12, 12:30, 1 o'clock. If I'm in Toronto, I might have a lunch, which means I'm home at 1:30, and then spend the day with Carolyn. And you know, we have a nice wife and 8 grandkids and 4 great kids and their wives, and one of them in New York. But yeah, so I'm not running as hard as I was.
And in terms of where you see the industry going, if you met someone coming into the industry today and they said to you, Ted, where do I start?
I think you've got to get some experience in the difficult sales part. Trying to check the time here. How much time? Well, we're good.
We're at 1:45.
Yeah, thank you. Going back to when I was in high school, I didn't know what an allowance was. I never had an allowance, so I always had jobs. And one of the jobs that I kind of fell into when I was about 15 was managing rock and roll bands and booking them into different places. When I got my license, I'd drive around to small towns and find jobs for them and take commissions for it, and 10%, sometimes 15%. Had some pretty good.
How old were you?
Games. 15 and then 16. I did it till I was about 20.
Wow.
So it was great. It was all commission. And it was great. You made as much money as you were worth. You didn't get paid a nickel that you didn't earn. So I did that. And then when I was at Ryerson in the summers, I sold nursery stock door to door. So those are trees and shrubs and flowers and, whatever. And made good money at that. Was making $2,500 a summer, which was good money in those days. But you need that kind of mileage, where you're selling something. People are saying no. A lot of people aren't used to hearing the word no. And I hear it and I think, okay, but what is he really saying? And what's behind the no? And instead of saying, well, if somebody says no, I don't say, oh, okay.
Right.
I say, tell me why you're thinking that way. What's behind that? Because there's usually people have some reason for saying what they're saying. And but I think you need that kind of experience so that you don't take things personally and stuff bounces off you. You don't take it in personally. And so coming into our business, I think you need that kind of experience. So I benefited from that prior. I think it helped me a lot in the first few years. I was making a note this morning about some of the things we might talk about. Some of my first clients were dance instructors at Arthur Murray's because I had worked there for a month while I was waiting for my London Life training program to start. And I met 3 or 4 nice people. And so we did business when I came back, but they are not good clients. I mean, I don't know about today, but they weren't good clients at the time. But, you sell who you can. So I think you need some experience.
It's interesting, Ted. My first client, I worked in a clothing store while I was in university. And one of the gentlemen that worked in the clothing store, who passed away just a few years ago, said, unlike most people who said, oh, you're going in the insurance business, don't call me. He said, you're going in the insurance business. I want to be a part of it. I want to be your first client. And it meant so much to me.
Yeah. Oh, they liked you, they respected you, they trusted you. I mean, that's huge, So so I think you need some of that experience, but I would skip through a lot of the stuff that I did from about year 2 till about probably year 10 or year 15. I think you can skip through a lot of that stuff. The seminars were invaluable, and I don't know if you could still do that now. I think you could. But get connected to the law firms. And in my opinion, that's the way to go. Focus on education, on being a great planning advisor, and keep moving up market. I mean, the up market, no one is chasing it effectively. And I say no one. I know there are some good people in our business, and you know them, but they're not looking for everybody. They're looking for specifics, and there are a lot of good people between where an initial advisor is and where that client is. The clients that are worth 25, 50 million, 100 million, they're fabulous clients. Nothing wrong with them. So I'd be looking for those people as soon as I could. And And I'd be okay with all the no's I'm going to get. 'Cause
Right.
you're going to get the odd yes, you know?
But listening to you since your very beginnings, when someone said no to you, you always viewed it as an opportunity. You always said, good news.
Yeah.
I can get
Yeah.
angry
Yep.
or I could fix this.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, when you work hard on something and a client says no, you're disappointed. You can't not be disappointed. But the other thing is, okay, that's done. Now I get to move on, take my experience and use it somewhere else. And you're better. It's all about constant growth, constant learning. Um, yeah.
You know, Dan Sullivan always says there's two teams, the winning team and the learning team.
Yeah, that's right.
So I've
He's
been
right.
on both.
Yeah. He is great. I was in Dan's program for 20 years and yeah, he's great. So many good
Well,
things.
the giveaway was earlier, and I hope everybody heard what you said, which was protect your confidence, because that's
Yeah.
one of Dan's cardinal rules.
Yeah.
Always
Yeah.
protect your confidence.
I may have quoted him subconsciously, because I remember him saying that. Yeah, protect your confidence.
But it's about being
No,
around positive people and doing the
yeah,
things that are meaningful to you.
yeah, yeah. I used to have an expression that I used with clients. Why are you doing this? You could. I have a client who, one of the more successful people I've met, uh, several billions of dollars of net worth, and he bought a private plane about 10 years ago now. And I said, gee, that's great. So you're going to be doing a lot of vacations. And he said, no. I said, what are you going to do with your plane? And by the way, he was 75. And he said, well, now I can go visit all my plants. He used to be, I had to wait around in the airports for 2 hours. Now he's get in the plane and I go. I said, so you're still going to work 60 hours a week? He said, yeah. Yeah. He said, get all this work done. And I was going to say, I used to have an expression, why are you doing this? You don't need this. You're not doing it for the money. Why are you doing this? And that's at the heart of a lot of our conversations. And most people are doing it because they're building something, not just for their legacy, but because they like the idea of building something. They love their employees. They love their families. They're building something that will become part of the culture, part of our country. It's a bigger picture thing. And I think you have to ask that of yourself. Why am I doing this? I know I'm doing this because I love it. What else would I do? I don't know which side of a stamp to lick, so I'm not going to start collecting stamps. I love what I'm doing. I get to talk to great people. Some of them say yes. And it's an amazing career. As I was saying earlier, you don't need capital. You just come and you do your work and meet some nice people and do some good work. And
And you don't retire from what you love.
oh, how could you? How could you? I can't imagine not doing this.
Well, you know my dad, Bill, God bless him, and he's in
Yep.
Florida. He's probably
Yep.
watching now because I know how much he loves
Yep.
and respects you. And he's
Great
calling me
guy.
from Florida about cases that we're working on, and I have the
Yep.
privilege of going with him to meetings every now and then. It's the
Yep.
best.
It's great. It's great. It's fun. I'm careful who I say that to because it sounds just a little not so serious. But there's nothing wrong with having fun when you do your work. It is fun.
Well, before I open it up to questions, I just want to point out that you said something that Dan Schindel taught us so many years ago. He said, people focus too much in our business on the how, but everything that happens is driven by the why.
Yep.
And you naturally ask that question. And some of the important whys that you raised today were shareholders agreements, were funding of taxes, were what do you do with your child that's in the business? How do you equalize for your children not in the business? And then the other subject that's coming up more and more, which is philanthropy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a big part of the conversation now. Yeah.
Well, Ted, what can I say? It's such a privilege for me to be here with you. I remember the first time we met you, we were at a dinner. It was a PPI dinner in Toronto, and Bill and I were leaving, and we had just met you. And we were on our way back to the hotel, and you said, well, how are you getting there? And we were just going to get into a taxi. And you said, well, I won't have that. And you took the time and you drove us, and we had this really nice chat because we were quite a bit out of your way. And I'll never forget when you got out of the car, when we got out of your car, and Bill looked at me and he said, that's what makes a star. You see how genuine he is. There's nobody busier than Ted Polci. And he wouldn't have it because it's real. He's real, and he wanted to share this time with us. It meant so much to us then, and it means so much to all of us today. So thank you. Thank you for these beautiful, valuable lessons. And like you said about your mentor, Mr. Donaldson, we want more of that. So thank you for sharing it with us today.
Yeah. Thanks, Barry. It's my pleasure. Totally.
And we'll open it up in these last few minutes to see if anybody has any questions or comments. Well, that's always a good sign. Oh, here, let's see. Oh, well, we have someone saying thank you and how wonderful it was. And Lawrence, I see you joining us again. So I'll turn it back to you, and thank you all for being here with us. And thank you, Ted.
Yeah. Thank you, Barry.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you, Ted. That was very enlightening. And you're perfectly right. Starting with nothing and becoming one of the real superstars of Canadian insurance. When I came into the business, you were already involved with LUAC, with the president very shortly thereafter. I've known you and your partner ever since. And every year, you have exceeded any expectation any of us could possibly have for you. Whether it is with LUAC, with the industry, with CALU, with STEP, with the study groups, with everything that you do, and I'd like to thank you. Next week, we'll be joined by Terry Zavitz, who will be interviewed by Paul Burbanier. And the following week, Jim Ruta will be interviewing Dave Patriarch. And then Ted Polci will be back, and he'll be interviewing me. Following that, we have Neil Payton, Bob Fleischacker, Brian Mallard, Miriam Malatesta, Mildred Davis, Micheline Veras. We have a bunch of veritable superstars, the real masters of insurance of the Canadian business joining us. After the next session, we'll start posting these webinars for viewing. And if anyone has any questions or any suggestions as to who might be recruited as a master of insurance for future webinars, I'd very much like to hear from you. Thank you, Krista Barzo, for assisting us, Barry Pascal for an exemplary job, and Ted Polci for sharing so much of your past and knowledge with us. Thank you all.